Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Breakthrough AI. This first session we're doing is what executives need to know. And we're having a conversation with Marcus Daley, who is NeuralMetrics' technical co-founder. So we're just going to talk, Marcus. I'm Claire DiNicola, and let's get going. Our whole goal with this series is it's designed to break down some of the most important topics around AI and give companies maybe something to think about, apply to their businesses, maybe spark a new thought or whatever. So really, let's just start with the basics. In a
hmm
short time, artificial intelligence has grown from a relatively kind of niche idea. So if you had to boil it down to, I'll say two things or maybe even three things, that's up
Yeah.
to you. What
Mhm.
should every executive be paying attention to now?
Yeah, I think, well, certainly the trust, how much can they trust AI? Trust, though, is not a passive thing. I think one of the ways that executives can discover what they can and can't trust is by using it. And
Mhm.
that's true also for their staff, right? At the end of the day, what I'm finding is that a lot of executives are talking about it, but they're not necessarily using it, and they're not necessarily pushing its use, at least not effectively, in the business that they're working in. Uh, but that's really, to be honest with you, the only way you're going to be able to, first of all, understand what the limitations are, understand the opportunities, and then because it is moving so fast, you also have to you need to pay attention to that because it's not one of those things that's standing still. So, what may be an issue today, literally within 24 hours, may not be an issue tomorrow. So, do you have a system in place that allows you to be able to get that feedback, or at least be aware that something has changed enough that you go back and revisit maybe some conclusions, even if they're very recent, so that you can stay ahead. I do think that those companies that adopt early, implement early, will capture a lot more of the network effects than what seen with past technology, because it's one where the marginal cost of adding a new customer or a new service or whatever drops so significantly when you're using a technology like this that there's an opportunity to capture potentially quite a bit of space. So making sure you've got those systems in place to stay up to speed are absolutely crucial at this point. Yeah.
Listen, so I think you're saying this is an area where people shouldn't be tentative. They should
Yeah.
just do it.
hmm yeah. It's interesting. We've had a number of people that I've worked closely with, that some of the companies I'm at, others that just coaching and what have you. And it's fascinating. A lot of times people will go in with that skepticism. Sometimes really almost anti AI, or however you want to describe it. But as soon as they start using it, almost immediately they start to see the value. And if you can, if they're especially if they're plugged into things you can do, because they don't realize a lot of those things that you can do.
Mhm.
But the barriers quickly fall down, and they start to then bake it into what they're doing, because they start to see that, hey, I actually can get this thing that I don't like doing done very quickly. I can, of course, check to make sure it's done accurately, but that doesn't take me much time. And now I've got that done, I can move on to the other thing that I would prefer to be doing that needs to get done too.
Mhm.
And that's those sort of light bulbs that go on for people, I think, are what cause it to go viral inside of a company, and certainly encourages people to consume more of it.
And you also said that trust is such a big factor and that one
hmm
feeds the other. So the more you do it, the more you will trust the outcomes of the AI.
Yeah, so there's some good news in that, they quite a in the past, a lot of that was perceived to be a black box. Things just came out
Mhm.
as answers, and they sometimes it's called hallucinations and what have you. I don't like that word, because the AI is actually doing a best effort to try to answer your question, and it guesses, But the going in there and seeing more now than you could before about how it's reasoning, also being able to provide you with live citations and so many other aspects of that transparency. I think that's something that previously wasn't there, and now is becoming like a real cornerstone of what we're seeing. And I think that also is helping a lot with the more of a feeling of trust. Mhm.
So, what are some of the kind of coolest or newest things that should be on people's radars that might not be?
Maybe if we stay on the theme of trust for that,
Hmm.
um, I feel like when we talk about um, citations, being able to ask the AI to help you with a particular task, and then having it go out and find hard to find facts that there's no way you would have found that on your own, searching,
Mhm.
uh, finding connections, where it's again cited connections, but where it's saying, hey, this and this are actually connected,
Yep.
and then you get this kind of amazing discovery that happens by connecting the dots that again would have taken a long time to do. One that I'm actually hoping to be able to write an article on sometime very soon is, and we've also done some research on this at NeuralMetrics, is this where I'm certain you're going to see more and more of audio, visual, and text, coming together in what we call superposition, and the representation of that in the AI itself, the way it's mathematically represented, is the same. And now you have the ability for connections to be made between different modalities that, as a human being, we do this. When you say when you use an analogy or you like refer to things, it's the same kind of a connection. And when you have the AI being able to make those sort of connections, and we do see this now in the real frontier models, that's when you're going to start to see some real breakthroughs, or at least you're going to see things that really can relate more with what you're doing as a business, because it actually not only has the text uh, idea of what you're talking about, but it also has the visual and sometimes the audio if that modality is supported.
We've talked a little bit about trust. You brought it up a couple of times, and you talked about gaining more trust from being
Mm-hmm.
able to see how the AI thinks or reasons. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, this goes back to the DeepSeek release. Everybody, of course, heard about that in the news. It made a lot of waves. It impacted the stock market. The real breakthrough was that, and I think some of the frontier companies had already made this breakthrough, but they hadn't published it. DeepSeek, and I appreciate what they did by publishing open source, all of their studies and open weights. And what they showed was that they had been able to trigger the ability for the AI to reason on its own. So it would be asked a question, it would be fed something where it needed to do some work, and it would reason through on its own how to solve the problem. And that reasoning had become visible. You could actually see it, but in the past you couldn't see it. And the close source frontier companies were not exposing it. They were exposing summaries of it, but they weren't showing the full thing. And so being able to see that, and then of course understanding how they did it because they published all that research, opened the door to amazing things you can do now with AI just since that release, where
Wow.
all of the major models now allow for this notion of reasoning. But to describe that, because a lot of people don't pay attention to it, they'll put a query into DeepSeek and then it just has this little box that says thinking, and they're like, oh, okay, I was just thinking. Well, no, actually, you can click on that and open it up, and in there you can see this stream. Just kind of think of it as like a chain of thought, where it's just going through all these ideas, and then it gets to a conclusion. And those ideas are what allow you and me to see what it's thinking, right? And that's where you start to now get to this point where, okay, I can start to trust this more. And look, there's going to be some things that may be wrong in there, and there's other challenges. But the point is that level of visibility wasn't available to us until recently. So that's a big one.
All right, let's switch gears from that into this agentic AI. We see it everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, I've heard one thing that said that autonomous AI assistants will be mainstream in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I think this is something I'm dealing with on a regular basis. At NeuralMetrics, um, we've been in the space for now quite some time. And I say that from an agentic standpoint. I've been in AI since the beginning, but the agent aspect is, a year and a half ish or so, I guess. And we saw this early on, changing from being AI to being agentic. Um, and agentic means, for those who aren't aware, the AI is goal oriented. It has an objective. It uses tools to achieve that objective. Those tools could be physical, they could be digital, but it uses those to achieve what you asked it to achieve or what it's been tasked to do. That's what it means. It's a multi-step,
Mhm.
usually following, always following a plan, right? And so that it's been interesting. I've spent so much of my own personal time um, working on these systems, and I would say that while we've built some amazing things over the last roughly year and a half, we'll say that we've been working on this within NeuralMetrics on the agentic side. The last no more than 3 or 4 months, the models, the ones, of course, that we use and work with, but also those coming out of the frontier labs and so on, that have changed a lot because the training has shifted from just knowledge to uh, abilities and capabilities. It's moved from how can I get more knowledge in there to reinforcing the right kind of behaviors. And those behaviors are agentic behaviors, which means it now uh, realizes that it's not just about providing you the answer, but like I need to like go do a few more things probably to make sure I'm providing the right answer. And oh, I need to use these tools, and here's how I use them. And that training going into the AI means, and you can tell the difference between one that's been trained that way and one that hasn't, that it is incredibly capable. It doesn't get sick. It doesn't have any political views. It doesn't. It will just keep going. And look,
Perfectly.
there are some things that still have to be worked out.
Mhm.
But they're so good now and just getting better that to answer to one of your questions there in terms of when should people get involved, I would say get involved now, because for some tasks they're already production ready. Other tasks there's a ways to go. But again, if you're first, my concern is that the value being first largely accrues to the person who's first, right? Where in the past, perhaps you might have a large diffusion curve there. I'm not.
Mhm.
I don't believe that that's true. I mean, and I may be wrong, but again, by the time some competitor comes in, you've already now improved things so much further and lowered your cost so much that again, when the AI is doing the work as opposed to human beings. So I think
Yeah.
that getting engaged now to understand it, even if it's challenging because of the use cases, I think it's worth the time.
What should executives be doing in the next year when it comes to this?
I do think you know finding ways to be able to have well, first of all, find your champions within the company, okay? Because I mean that is key. Um, these are people who are willing to do work off the side of their desk or at nights and weekends, who really are excited about this. And then, are there projects? Don't pick the highest value project because usually they're the most difficult.
Mhm.
Ones though that you can, in a few chess moves, get to the highest value, but one where you're like, hey, I just let's prove this point first, and then go, have those teams go out and make that happen.
Mhm.
I think that doing that, it doesn't have to be high cost, and you can create value doing that. So if you capitalize what you're doing from a capex standpoint, that can be helpful from an accounting standpoint. Um, but I think that that's the key is identifying those use cases where it's clear you can draw some conclusions, but it's not so difficult that it's the deep end of the pool from day one, and have a few of those in the works. And I think that's enough. And some companies are doing way more than that, and most are doing none at all, other than just every once in a while talking to ChatGPT. You want to be on the early adopter side of that curve in case I'm right that so much of the value accrues to the first adopter of the tech. So I think that's what you should be doing. Again, for most companies of a medium or large size, that kind of capital use, I think, is good capital use. You could argue to your boards, and I think be very successful in arguing for that. If you're a small startup, you really should be doing AI first, as in everything you're doing, in my opinion. And that may mean that you got to spend a lot of time, going through perhaps some trial and error, but
Mhm.
I would not be doing it to startup right now where that is not the case, because you got to be, skating to where the puck is going. You can't be, back where it is today. So
Um, Thank you very much, Marcus. This has been great. I think a good stimulating conversation and a great starter for this series. So
yeah,
appreciate your time here.
thank you.